A judge's mindset is different from a politician's because a judge has to do interest or to do justice to all of the groups I mentioned last time. In a murder case, to the victim of the murder, to the family of the victim, to the accused, to do right by the various legal codes and precedents that exist, and to make sure that the decisions in the courtroom will not harm society outside of the courts. And one of the things that distinguishes a judicial mindset from a political one is this thing we call disinterest. Disinterest does not mean a judge comes into court with a hangover and a bad attitude. I don't care. I don't care. Beep, 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 beep. I don't care. I don't care. It's not what I mean. Disinterest doesn't mean the judge doesn't care. Disinterest means I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a stake in this argument. I am not emotionally or financially or in any way, shape, or form psychologically invested in who wins and who loses the case. The reason that the statue of justice is blindfolded is because in our system, in the Western systems of law, it shouldn't matter who you are. It should matter what you've been proven to have done. The judge, like the statue of Lady Justice, is blindfolded so that the only evidence that should be weighed on the scales of justice is the evidence brought into that courtroom lawfully. And based on the lawfully obtained evidence, it's either guilty or innocent, or somewhere in between. That disinterest is key. Politicians become politicians often because they care about something. Winston Churchill in England in the late 1800s and throughout the 1900s until the 1950s and 60s was involved with politics because it was the family business, but also because he wanted to make the British Empire a better place. That's why he was a liberal politician in his youth, and he wanted to protect the British Empire from the evil of Nazism and of communism, and that's why he became a conservative later in life. Churchill cared about ideas and did not want government to grow so strong that the people would be strangled by it. President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, before being president, had spent a lifetime as a liberal Hollywood actor and the union leader of the Screen Actors Guild, and then he became a conservative. He was inspired as a politician, as governor of California and president of the United States, by the idea of taking the power of the federal government and shrinking it so that as the government's power shrank, the power of the people would grow. The power of individuals to make decisions without reference to government. President Harry Truman is a Democrat. And President Truman got involved in politics in order to build roads in his county near Kansas City, Missouri. He got involved in politics. He was a county commissioner, called a judge, but he was really a county commissioner, in order to make sure that the money spent in his county was spent well, and to make sure that the unfortunate within his county received good county services. And when he became a U.S. Senator, he also was in politics to try to make the United States a more just and decent society, especially for the people on the outside. And this is what he did as president as well. His motivations as a more liberal Democrat are different from those of Ronald Reagan or Winston Churchill, well, older Winston Churchill, in detail. But all three men are on my wall because I admire the way each of them in their different ways with their different ideals, the way each of them tried to use the opportunities they were given to make the world a better place. And each of them suffered, and each of them experienced failure, and each of them was maligned, and each of them was in the wilderness at one time or another, but they all tried their best to be worthy of carrying the torch for their political ideals. That's the job of a politician and of a statesman. It is not the job of a judge. A judge is not supposed to be so fired by the political ideals of the time as the presidents were and the prime minister. A judge may have their private views, but a judge is not supposed to bring those views into the courtroom in a manner that abuses the trust that the judge has been given. The judge has been given the stewardship of this thing we call law and justice. And we, the people, expect and need and require that judge not to act as an advocate for a point of view, but to act as a disinterested steward whose only concern is doing justice to all involved. And last time I told you exactly how complicated and how big a job that really is. So there is an absolute and utter need for a judicial mindset on the part of judges that is not political, but is above politics, that is about the Constitution and the law and the evidence in a particular case and justice, the aspiration to justice. Judges are not supposed to be politicians. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now you may ask, if that's the case, why are there so many judges in the United States that are elected? Doesn't that indicate a political side? Yes and no. Judges, unlike other elected officials, those judges who are elected tend to be elected and were intended to be elected as wise, mature, and prudent stewards, as people whose common sense you could trust. Unlike electing a mayor or a county commissioner or a governor or a congressman, senator, or president, you elect a judge because if you were in danger, you would trust them with your life and the lives of your loved ones in their hands. That's what people are supposed to go for with judges. A need for a mature, disinterested fellow or lass who is capable psychologically, emotionally, intellectually of trying to be the personification of blind justice. And yet, like so much else in our country today, the judicial system has become even more politicized than our human nature would need it to be. For the last century, there have been growing tendencies away from the idea of a disinterested, apolitical, above and beyond politics, just interested in the Constitution, just interested in justice, judiciary. Instead, we have an entire school of law, legalism, and justice that says that judicial activism is the way to go. And there's another school that says that the original intent of the founders requires us to be apolitical and disinterested. And we'll talk about this difference next time.